Listen, I'm not proud of this. Around 13 years ago, I ended up in Boston to sign a contract with a high-profile client. The deal went well, so my colleague and I took ourselves out to celebrate. I wasn't a dad yet, so I could still bounce back from a heavy night of drinking, and this is precisely what we intended to do. We went to a few places and met someone who recommended a place nearby. If any of you are familiar with the classic tourist trap, the Champagne Bar, you already know where this is headed. We were younger, most probably naive, and had no idea where we were going. We ended up somewhere I could only describe as seedy at best. Tacky velvet furniture, intimidating patrons, blaring bad music. Never mind. We still bought enough alcohol to keep ourselves entertained. But when the time came to pay, the bill was astronomical. I'm talking thousands of dollars. The scary bouncer who delivered it to us didn't say much, but his silence was threatening enough. What would you do in this situation? Well, I was pretty intoxicated by then, so I made a poor decision to put it on my credit card. See, I thought I was being pretty smart. I worked in the fintech industry, and I knew perfectly well that banks have a system in place to refund people whose credit cards have been stolen. It's exactly what I would pretend and say happened. My reasoning was simple. A, of course I didn't fancy being beaten up. B, I was being scammed, and I could explain that to the bank afterwards. And C, for my bank, a big faceless entity, I wrongly rationalised it'd be a drop in the ocean. This is, by the way, what's called friendly fraud, or an intentional chargeback, when the cardholder pretends that they didn't make the payment. Well, I made a fool of myself because the dispute with the bank escalated. It dragged on for months, and eventually I had to accept the full charges. Adding insult to injury, the bar provided footage of me leaving at 3 in the morning. It wasn't a pretty sight. Now, let me ask you, what do you picture when you think about cyber criminals? Is it a hacker typing away in a basement in a hoodie? Glasses lit by the glare of multiple computer monitors? A Rami Malek-like character in the vigilante hacker TV series Mr. Robot? Or is it a flashy-looking social media celebrity posing next to a garish Lamborghini surrounded by stacks of dollar bills? Hold those images in your head, I'll return to them. Why am I talking about this? See, after I graduated, I've had a front row seat at the very onset of online commerce. I've been in startup tech at the very cutting edge of protecting online payments and spotting fraud patterns and criminal rings for the past 13 years for some of the largest and biggest brands in retail, travel, gambling, and financial services. And what I've seen is quite surprising. Yes, I've interviewed white-collar criminals who've spent years in federal prisons. I researched the dark web and bought air travel tickets at a 30% plus discount because they've been acquired with stolen credit cards. I've spoken with career fraudsters who made so much money from attacking online gaming sites. They had run out of ideas on how to spend it. But what I'm here to tell you today is that, on the whole, online fraudsters look a lot more like you and me than you may think. In fact, as I led with, I was somewhat a failed fraudster. Many of you may be fraudsters too. Let me explain. So I don't need to remind everyone, first of all, that times are exceptionally hard, especially due to the pandemic. For many of you here at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, it's been disastrous. Productions are on forced hiatus. The historically reliable source of second income for many aspiring actors, technicians and designers, that is the service industry, isn't doing much better either. But hey, there's a silver lining. At least you've got that special pandemic Deliveroo discount. It's 10% off, who could sneer at that? Well, now you've used your coupon once, how about you send your code to your housemate's phone to get the referral bonus? Now that's done, wouldn't it make sense to dig up that old prepaid SIM card you have lying around? How about it? It works. You've now successfully performed what we in the industry call a multi-accounting attack. So, okay, what else could you do with multiple accounts? That's a good question. Perhaps you find a second-hand item you want to buy online. Now you don't want to pay the full price, so you create another account on eBay and make a stupidly low offer. Now your original offer looks a lot more attractive. This also works with selling, of course. You could get your buddies to bid a few times in order to drive the price up. If you're crowdfunding a project and you can't quite make it to the goal, why not ask someone to make a phony pledge, which you'll refund later? These are not fraud, by the way. Not technically. In fact, I got these ideas from a subreddit for slightly unethical life hacks. There's a whole cottage industry dedicated to collecting those. Let's say you've got all those accounts on multiple devices. Why not put them to good use elsewhere? Online casinos are a good place to start. They're not allowed to advertise on Google, so one way they get a new player's attention is with attractive bonus offers. So you sign up with several accounts and get a few free roulette spins for each. This is what we call bonus abuse, and it costs the industry millions of dollars per year. But you could do more. How about controlling multiple players at the same online poker table? Or the same principles apply for, say, an online role-playing game. You could bully other players into submission more easily. This is called advantage playing, and the beauty of it is that it's not illegal. Cheating is illegal. Advantage playing is just another one of those grey areas. But I forgot one thing. Let's say the company that hosts a game has some kind of online security measures in place. You'll need a proof of ID, like a selfie with your passport picture. No problem. In fact, you have a plethora of options. The first one is only a Google search away. You'll find dozens of ID photoshopping services widely available on the internet. And that's the ClearNet, by the way, the index websites you and I can access on a daily basis. The second option seems riskier, but it's also more thrilling. You can go on the darknet and buy huge databases of personal information. You know how it seems every month there's a news story about yet another record-breaking data breach? This is where that data ends up. So you join the darknet and buy a data dump. This takes minutes, by the way, and zero technical knowledge is needed. If you can follow an online tutorial, you're pretty much already there. But there are other interesting files in that data dump you bought. Credit card numbers. Combined with the associated IDs, this is what fraudsters call a fools, because now you can create a full user account online and buy things. Of course, you need to be smart about it, so you only target the small online shops, and you give a fake shipping address, maybe an empty mailbox on your street. For those who want to buy illegal things online, there's even a pretty famous downloadable guide that includes a pretty great story. Someone spotted an abandoned house in the neighbourhood. To use the mailbox as theirs, they simply pretended to move in. So they'll go and mow the lawn every now and then, eventually change the locks, and use the house as what's called a drop. So you receive your items and sell them back on eBay at 50% of the retail value. That's still infinite profit to you. The point is, now you can easily use other people's credit cards. And if you have moral qualms about it, the good news is that banks have a whole process in place to refund the money you've stolen to the right cardholder. It's called a chargeback. And by the time the process is initiated and the card is frozen, you've already moved on to another account. By now, you've become rather good at buying things online with other people's money. It may be called transaction fraud or credit card fraud, but it only looks like numbers on your screen. It's not like you're really hurting anyone. And besides, the money is decent, so why not scale your operations up a notch? You now launch your own phishing campaigns to get the freshest user data. You send scammy, lookalike text messages, which we've all received. The texts say that you're from a bank or from the tax authority, and there's an urgent action to take by clicking a hyperlink. You know these are deliberately designed to not work on people like you and me. But say my dad, who's over 60, an immigrant from Hong Kong, and critically whose reading English skills aren't all that great, you can bet that he clicks a link in seconds. And like with spam, the success rate is very low. But on a scale of hundreds of millions of targets, it still allows some professional crime rings to net 7 or 8 figure annual incomes from sending emails alone. So by this time, you realise that you need to automate. You learn about programming bots, leverage more sophisticated tools like anti-device fingerprinting browsers and emulators, which are designed to hide real data to the websites you target. You can even buy USB sticks preloaded with an entire browser history that's been made to look like an innocent user. Now you start frequenting encrypted Telegram channels, meet with like-minded criminals. Someone contacts you about assembling a team. They hire a developer from Russia for hacking passwords with brute force, someone in the US who's an expert at carding, and an email phishing specialist from Vietnam. It's thrilling. It's a little bit like Ocean's 11. And sure, these guys might have links to money laundering and terrorist organizations, but it's still just numbers on a screen. And these aren't just what ifs, by the way. We know for a fact that dark money that comes from fraud goes on to fuel criminal marketplaces for the very worst of humanity, resulting in child pornography and human trafficking. So now it's become a full-time job. Again, it isn't something people necessarily associate with online crime, but fraudsters are incredibly entrepreneurial. They run their operations like businesses. We've got the data, and attacks from the biggest operations seem to magically pause during the weekend and holidays. Most of the fraudsters I interview as part of my research, the real-life ones, they're more worried about competition from fellow cyber criminals touting their services in the crowded crime-as-a-service market than retribution from actual law enforcement agencies. In fact, now you're well established as a fraudster, you could always pivot to a new career as a consultant, switch to the side of the good guys and make an honest living. You probably all saw the Leonardo DiCaprio real-life character in Catch Me If You Can. You can wear that former fraudster badge with pride and regale people in the risk industry with tales of your most extravagant exploits. But now, imagine for a second that you do have regrets, and you think about who's being hurt by your actions. Well, it's not the banks. It's not Amazon. Fraudsters aren't Robin Hood. The people you're hurting the most are really the small online stores. It's the people like you and me who wake up in the morning to find their bank accounts have been drained overnight. And the big disconnect here is, if we go back to our original example with the Deliveroo coupons, what's the real life crime equivalent? Is it like walking into a store and grabbing a bunch of items? Is it like mugging? What's the real life equivalent of logging into someone else's Instagram account and posting mean comments? But I guess the big question I like to pose with this talk is, how ethical is your digital life? From my perspective on the Wild West of online security, there's a very high chance that it's not a spotless record. And sure, I'll be the first to admit that online security is broken at many levels. The law isn't yet adapted to the digital landscape. There's no strong financial incentive for risk companies to stop small-scale fraud. There's also a constant tension between data privacy, which should be a human right, and data collection, which we as a cyber industry actually need to protect you from attackers. But the biggest pattern I've noticed is this. When it comes to online behavior and perceptions, if we picture a criminal, we think of a sensationalist image and jump quickly to preconceptions, like the hooded hacker at the beginning. But this simply isn't the case. Think of this as a base of a pyramid. The largest number of criminal offences are clearly made up of those low-level crimes, the muggings, the theft. The vast majority of crime doesn't come from those apex crimes like murders or armed robbery. It's the average person who spots the wallet left behind the restaurant counter, takes the money and runs. See, you don't need to be a criminal mastermind. You just have to be morally flexible for one split second. And as I've demonstrated today, it's very, very easy to be morally flexible online. So online security might indeed be broken, but I do believe that personal responsibility can still go a long way in helping us create a safer world, both online and in real life. And I think that's an idea worth spreading. Thank you.